What's up, guys? Welcome to Fear Feed, the channel that brings you original scary stories. Please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below if you like the story or not. Also, you can pitch in if you have an idea for a story, throw it in the comments. We can make it into one. We'll make it into an episode. Now to the story. Alright, today we visit the Miller family and their beautiful new home. And they have an unexpected guest. So, we're going to find out what the hell that's about. Probably break out the china since we have guests tonight. So let's dive in. Chapter 1. Unsettling Beginnings. The crisp autumn air swirled fallen leaves around Maplewood Drive's manicured lawns, a picture of suburban perfection. The Miller family, David, a lawyer whose preference for order showed in his neatly trimmed beard, Sarah, a kindergarten teacher whose warm smile now seemed tinged with fatigue, and their children, 8-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Tom, stood on the porch of their new home. The two-story colonial, with its white shutters and wraparound porch, was meant to be their safe haven. The scent of cut grass mingled with the earthly aroma of damp soil, a comforting fragrance that did little to ease the faint disquiet Sarah felt, easily attributed to the whirlwind move. Initially, the house felt like a dream realized. Spacious rooms, a gleaming kitchen, a quiet backyard promising escape from urban clamor. But almost immediately, subtle disturbances began. A faint knock late at night felt more than heard throughout the floorboards. Just how settling, David, ever the pragmatist, assured her. A misplaced book, a vanished toy. Sarah tried to dismiss these as exhaustion, the stress of unpacking. Yet a persistent feeling, like unseen eyes watching, lingered even in daylight. "Old houses make noise, Sarah," David would say soothingly, though perhaps more to convince himself than her. The children, however, reacted differently. Lily, usually bright and expressive, grew quieter, clutching her stuffed rabbit tighter. Tom, typically a whirlwind of energy, would sometimes freeze mid-play, his body rigid, staring at empty corners as if listening to something inaudible. Their reactions weren't the playful apprehension of exploring a new place. It felt deeper, a primal unease clinging to them. Their hushed whispers about noises only added to the subtle tension weaving itself into the family dynamic. Their sense of disquiet, once a whisper, became a low hum beneath their daily lives. It was in the way shadows seemed to pool in corners even on sunny days, the way silence could feel heavy and distorted, the way a chill could prickle Sarah's skin despite the warmth. The cheerful decor Sarah had meticulously arranged seemed slightly muted against the growing atmosphere. The pristine white walls felt less welcoming, more stark. One evening, putting Lily to bed, Sarah noticed a faint scratch on the bathroom mirror, barely visible, like a single stylized S, an imperfection in the glass, she told herself, yet the seed of doubt found fertile ground in her anxiety. The next day, another mark appeared, this time on the freshly painted kitchen wall near the pantry. A crudely drawn sun, but one ray extended longer than the others, ending in an oddly sharp point. Sarah caught David's eye. They exchanged an uneasy glance. This felt less like coincidence, more deliberate. The unsettling tension from subtle disturbances to something more overt had begun. Chapter 2. Cryptic Messages. The marking started subtly. The first faint S on the mirror easily dismissed, then the crude pointed sun etched on the kitchen wall, unsettling, undeniably a jarring note in their carefully curated home. A few days later, while David was to distract a subdued Tom with a card game, a fragile attempt at normalcy, Sarah discovered a third message, etched into the wooden frame of a family photograph, were the words, "Soon." The script was spidery, uneven, as if pressed into the wood with a sharp point. A chill colder than the autumn air seeped through the old window frames, traced its way down her spine. Not a child's random mark. This was purposeful, malicious. The messages began to appear more frequently, in unexpected places. Condensation on the bedroom window, the underside of a dusty shelf, inside a cupboard door. Simply at first, "Hello," watching. Then escalating, "You're next," declared one. The childish script amplifying the horror. "Don't hide," warned another, leaving Sarah nauseated with fear. Strange symbols, unidentifiable and vaguely ritualistic, appeared alongside the words, whispering of something malevolent. David, though still attempting a rational stance, couldn't ignore the pattern. His suggestions of pranks or stress felt increasingly hollow. Even to him, sleepless nights spent listening for the next sound etched lines of strain around his eyes. Their evening conversations grew clipped, punctuated by anxious glances rather than easy banter. The children bore the brunt most visibly. Lily clung to her parents, her eyes wide with a terror that surpassed typical childhood anxieties. Her nightmares intensified. Filled with piercing screams, Tom became withdrawn, his usual energy replaced by apprehension. He'd sit for hours staring intently at walls, as if trying to decipher sounds only he could perceive. The family unit, once harmonious, was fraying under the unspoken pressure. Sarah found herself compulsively scanning surfaces, hands trembling, searching for the next menacing scrawl. The house became less home, more cage. The sense of unease permeated every corner. Happy family photos seemed like relics from another life, the vibrant colors of the children's artwork muted by the oppressive atmosphere. The tension was a palpable thing. David's attempts at games felt forced, a thin veil over his own rising panic. Sarah felt increasingly isolated, worried her fears were being dismissed even as evidence grew. The bond between them, once solid, showed hairline cracks under the strain. The messages grew more frequent, more threatening. Sarah began photographing each one, documenting their escalating ordeal. One night she awoke to a low sound from the basement, a guttural whisper, followed by soft scrapes, like something scratching wood behind the partition wall, separating the finished area from the old, unused section. Nausea washed over her. The feeling of being watched was intense. The next morning a new message appeared on their bedroom door, written in a thick, dark substance she couldn't identify. Tonight. Stark, direct, an ultimatum. The game, if it ever was one, had changed. The fear was no longer just in the house. It was the house, poisoning their waking hours and haunting their dreams. David, his skepticism finally shattered, suggested calling the police. But how could they explain? Cryptic messages? Unseen presence? A growing dread? The thought filled them with a chilling helplessness. Their cherished home had become a stage for a macabre drama, and they were trapped actors waiting for the final, terrifying act. Chapter 3. Unfinished Basement. Subtle vibrations began to run through the floorboards. A low hum fell deep within the house's structure. At first Sarah dismissed them, the normal settling of an old foundation, but the tremors grew more frequent, more insistent, a rhythmic pulse seeming to originate from one area, the unfinished section of the basement, concealed behind the aged partition wall. Lily was the first to voice her fear. She ran into Sarah's room one morning, pale and wide-eyed. "Mommy," she whispered, trembling. "It's talking to me." Sarah initially attributed this to Lily's escalating anxiety, a manifestation of the fear shrouding their home. But when Tom echoed similar claims, whispering about noises from behind the wall, a cold dread took root in Sarah's heart. The sounds were faint initially, scratches, scrapes, like fingernails dragging across wood, barely audible over the house's normal hum. Sometimes a dull thud, as if something heavy dropped. Other times, soft clicks, like rhythmic tapping. They seemed to emanate from the walls, terrifying whispers from behind a barrier meant to isolate them from the unknown beyond. That partition wall itself was an anomaly in the otherwise renovated basement. Constructed of thick, aged wood stained nearly black, it separated the finished living area from a dark, unused rear section. David had noted it when they moved in, speculating about a hidden room lost to time. Now the wall felt menacing, a tangible focus for their fear. Sarah found herself drawn to it, listening intently, tracing the rough surface, searching for any hint of what lay beyond. An almost palpable tension seemed to crackle around it. The house itself felt altered. Familiar features twisted into something sinister. Floorboards creaked like footsteps. Leaves rustled like whispers. Shadows in corners seemed to wreath. The air grew heavy, musty, with an acrid undertone hinting at decay. The children's distress deepened. Lily's nightmares intensified, filled with shadowy figures and scratching sounds, leaving her screaming and inconsolable. Tom retreated further into himself, his usual boisterous energy replaced by an unnerving stillness. He would sit for hours, staring at the partition wall, eyes wide and unblinking, transfixed. Sarah felt perpetually on edge, scanning her surroundings, unable to shake the suffocating feeling of being watched, trapped. She began documenting the events, photographing subtle shifts, recording strange noises, noting times and locations in a macabre diary of their ordeal. David, his skepticism steadily eroding, joined her vigils, listening for scratches, the whispers, the tremors. The fear in his eyes betrayed his attempt at rationalization. Claustrophobia became overwhelming. The house felt like a cage, walls closing in, shadows lengthening, the silence itself seemed to pulse. They were trapped in a waking nightmare. The basement, particularly the section hidden behind the dark wood partition, was the epicenter of their shared terror, a symbol of the unknown horror consuming them. Sleep offered no escape. Every creak, every rustle magnified into something sinister. The vibrant colors of their life felt drained, replaced by a monochrome of fear and uncertainty. Chapter 4. Sarah's Discovery. The nightmares intensified, shifting from indistinct flickers to reoccurring, visceral visions. The dark, oppressive space behind the basement partition, shadowy figures lurking just out of sight, and the suffocating feeling of unseen eyes following her every move. She'd wake gasping, drenched in cold sweat, heart pounding, the chilling image imprinted on her mind. These harrowing dreams became a catalyst, pushing her beyond fear toward a desperate need for answers. She found herself repeatedly drawn to the partition wall, compelled by an unseen force. Hours were spent standing before it, tracing the rough, dark-stained wood, searching for any anomaly. One evening, after a particularly vivid nightmare, her fingers brushed against something near the baseboard. A slight give, a subtle looseness in one of the wooden panels. Different from the others, her breath caught. Adrenaline surged, heart pounding with a mixture of terror and anticipation. She carefully pried at the loose panel. It yielded, swinging inward slightly to reveal a small, dark cavity hidden within the wall structure. Reaching into the opening, her fingers brushed against something soft and textured. Taking a deep breath, she pulled out a worn photograph. It showed a young woman, face obscured by shadows, eyes hollow and haunted, something she didn't recognize. A chill traced its way down Sarah's spine. She reached in again, pulling out more objects, a tattered journal filled with cryptic, paranoid entries about the house. A bundle of old letters addressed to someone named Elias, several rusted keys on a ring, and a small, intricately carved wooden box. Opening the box revealed more old photos, each depicting a different person, all sharing the same haunted, hollow-eyed look. A sense of profound despair radiated from the objects, the darkness of the past clinging to them. The discovery shattered her fragile grasp on normalcy. The unsettling noises, the tremors, the whispers, they weren't imagination, they were real, tangible evidence of a clandestine presence lurking within their home. Watching silently, the hidden space was proof, a manifestation of their deepest fears. Sarah's initial shock gave way to fierce determination, a maternal instinct to protect her children overriding her fear. She knew the police might dismiss this, she needed proof. She meticulously photographed each item before carefully replacing them in the hidden cavity, an act of defiance against the unseen presence. The hidden space was no longer just part of the house, it was a symbol of the intrusion, a chilling reminder of the danger within their own walls. Their home had become a battleground, a silent war between the visible and the unseen. Sleep became impossible, replaced by hypervigilance. The discovery marked a turning point, the passive victim to active investigator, ready to confront the darkness, whatever the cost. The hunt had begun. Chapter 5. Calling for help. The adrenaline from Sarah's discovery faded, leaving a bone-deep chill and trembling hands. She laid out the disturbing items for David, the haunted photograph, the cryptic journal, the letters to Elias, the keys, the unsettling box of portraits. Her initial disbelief quickly gave way to stunned silence, then a dawning horror that mirrored her own. The flimsy facade of their ordinary suburban life crumbled under the weight of this tangible evidence. The strange knocks, the misplaced objects, these weren't settling noises or imagination, they were calculated actions. The whispers weren't figments, they were a chilling reality of an unseen presence. The unspoken realization hung heavy between them. Their sanctuary was violated, their world irrevocably altered. The house felt like a cage, trapping them in a nightmare. Familiar family rhythms were replaced by a gnawing fear, a constant tension permeating their lives. Driven by a potent mix of fears and resolve, Sarah dialed 911. Her voice, usually calm, trembled as she recounted the discoveries, the messages, the escalating events. The dispatcher, initially sounding routine, listened with growing seriousness as Sarah described the hidden space and the strange objects. 2 officers arrived quickly, their initial expressions professionally skeptical. They examined the hidden cavity, documented the items Sarah had temporarily removed, and checked for fingerprints, but found nothing definitive. The detective assigned a weary man named Miller, whose eyes seemed to hold a weight of countless unsolved cases, listened patiently with Sarah and David recounting their ordeal. He took notes, asked standard questions, but his professional detachment felt like a shield against the inexplicable nature of their story. He noted no sign of forced entry, no obvious way the hidden space could be accessed externally without disturbing the partition. The messages remained a baffling enigma. It was as if the source had simply vanished. The investigation deepened the mystery rather than solving it. The police examined the journal, letters, and photos. The journal entries were fragmented, paranoid ramblings alluding to a dark past connection to the house and vague threats. The letters to Elias were equally baffling, offering no clear clues. The portrait shared a disturbing, haunting emptiness in the subject's eyes. Despite efforts, the police found no links to known individuals or missing persons reports. This lack of concrete evidence frustrated the officers. While polite, their follow-up questions hinted at explanations involving stress or suggestion, leaving Sarah and David feeling unheard. Their terror dismissed. The official investigation concluded with the events logged as unexplained, offering no protection and little reassurance. It highlighted the stark limits of rational procedures when faced with something that defied conventional explanation. The days following were fraught with anxiety. The house remained their prison. Every creak amplified, every shadow seemed to shift menacingly. The children, sensing the unabated tension, grew more agitated, their own nightmares echoing their parents' fears. The once harmonious family dynamic fractured further under the strain of constant hypervigilance. Their sense of security was shattered, replaced by a suffocating vulnerability. Even simple routines felt tainted by unease. David, now sharing Sarah's dread, saw the patterns, the misplaced items, the lingering feeling of being watched. This shared experience bonded them in fear, but also deepened their isolation from an oblivious world. The whispers and tremors persisted, perhaps even grew bolder. Who was Elias? What was the significance of the portraits? What dark secret did the house hold? The unanswered questions gnawed at them, leaving them trapped in a labyrinth of uncertainty. The feeling of violation was profound. Their home remained a source of terror. The nightmare, it seemed, had only just begun. Chapter 6. The Aftermath. The police car's flashing lights dissolved into the night, leaving the Millers bathed in the cold glow of the porch light. The brief flicker of hope ignited by the official investigation extinguished, replaced by a silence that felt heavier, more ominous than the disturbances themselves. The house, their intruded sanctuary, seemed to press in, its familiar architecture feeling alien and menacing. Sarah shivered, pulling her cardigan tighter. The adrenaline had ebbed, leaving profound exhaustion and a deep-seated unease. Detective Miller's polite, but ultimately dismissive demeanor resonated, amplifying her fear that perhaps she was losing her grip, that the terror wasn't real, despite the evidence she held. She looked at David, his face etched with a weariness that mirrored her own. The shared ordeal had forged a unique bond, yet also opened a chasm of unspoken anxieties between them. David, though now forced to confront the inexplicable, still wrestled with the implications. He offered reassurance to Sarah, murmuring about stress and the power of suggestion, but the words felt hollow. He couldn't dismiss the unsettling objects, the history of the messages, the palpable tension that had gripped their home. Doubt gnawed at his composure. He found himself glancing over his shoulder, listening intently for the sounds in the quiet. His senses stretched to an unfamiliar level of vigilance. Their children, Lily and Tom, absorbed the tense atmosphere even without fully grasping the details. They had seen the police, felt their parents' fears. Lily became more withdrawn, her usual cheerfulness clouded by anxiety, clinging to Sarah for comfort. Tom was plagued by nightmares, waking with screams about shadowy figures and whispers, his boisterous energy replaced by subdued watchfulness. Their innocent play lost its joy, replaced by hushed tones and frightened glances. The peaceful suburban backdrop felt tainted. Their street, once a symbol of safety, now seemed potentially threatening, every shadow holding imagined danger. The house itself contributed to their anxiety. Its normal creaks sounded like footsteps. Shadows seemed to wreath just beyond focus. The feeling of being observed persisted, a constant unnerving pressure that toyed with their sanity. Sarah obsessively checked locks, peered into closets, her nerves perpetually frayed. Sleep became a scarce commodity, the night amplifying every sound into a potential threat. Trying to maintain normalcy for the children felt like acting in a play where everyone knew the script was a lie. Family dinners became strained affairs, marked by silences and worried looks. The trauma wasn't just the events themselves, but the profound violation of their security. The knowledge of an unknown presence had invaded their private space, scrutinized their lives, and left its chilling mark. This sense of safety was irrevocably damaged. David increasingly noticed patterns Sarah had pointed out. The subtle shifts, the misplaced objects, the uncanny feeling of being watched. He couldn't shake the possibility of an intruder, not necessarily physical, but something manipulating their lives, turning their home into a hunting ground. The days bled together in a haze of desperation and isolation. Attempts to explain their situation to friends were met by well-mannered disbelief, reinforcing their solitude. The children's nightmares grew more vivid, their anxieties more pronounced, Sarah's own mental state frayed, disturbed sleep mingling with daytime dread. David felt the immense pressure of trying to remain strong while grappling with his own eroding certainty. The subtle tremors in the house seemed like ominous warnings. The feeling of being watched intensified. They were trapped in a psychological nightmare with no clear escape route. The police investigation yielded no answers, only deepened their sense of abandonment and the chilling realization that their ordeal was far from over. Chapter 7. Lingering Fear. The weeks following the police investigation were a blur of strained normalcy. Punctuated by jolts of remembered terror, the Millers tried to resume their routines, acting as if disturbing events were a nightmare from which they'd woken. But the pretense was fragile. Easily shattered by a sudden noise or an odd shadow, their home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a space holding its breath. Familiar corners seeming to harbor unseen threats. Daylight offered little respite. The sun streamed through the windows but seemed only to cast elongated, dancing shadows that caught their eyes. Every creak of the floorboard, every rustle of the leaves became a potential trigger, sparking surges of adrenaline that left them breathless and on edge. Mundane tasks like making breakfast were performed with a hyper-awareness, a constant scanning of surroundings. Sleep remained elusive, only replaced by vivid, disturbing nightmares. Sarah's dreams replayed images of the hidden room, the cryptic messages, and the suffocating sensation of being watched. She'd wake in a cold sweat, heart pounding, the residue of fear clinging to her like a shroud. The children's nightmares were equally distressing. Lily would wake screaming about shadowy figures reaching from the darkness. Tom muttered about whispers and figures that seemed to follow him even during the day, his usual boisterous energy replaced by a quiet anxiety. Their daily rhythm was broken. The children's playful energy was replaced by a palpable unease. Family dinners became tense, marked by long silences and anxious glances. Even playing together felt shadowed by a lurking apprehension. The house itself seemed complicit. Its normal sounds felt ominous. The shadows seemed to deepen and the very air felt thick with unspoken tension. David, despite his efforts to rationalize, found himself succumbing to the pervasive sense of dread. He began noticing the subtle anomalies he'd previously dismissed, misplaced objects, an unsettling feeling of an unseen presence. He developed compulsive routines, double-checking the doors were bolted, walking the perimeter of the house before bed, his senses perpetually scanning for anything out of place. His outward confidence eroded, replaced by the persistent feeling of that something profoundly wrong was occurring. Attempts to share their experience with friends or family were met with concerned skepticism. Their stories sounded unbelievable, even to them at times, yet the visceral sense of dread was undeniable. Polite suggestions about stress only increased their isolation. Weeks bled together, marked by desperation. The faint whispers or tremors seemed to continue, more insistent now. The house felt burdened, groaning under the unseen weight. The feeling of being watched intensified, as if the unseen presence grew bolder. Sarah sought refuge outside during the day, though even sunlight felt tainted. Every movement in the periphery a potential threat. David turned inward, reviewing security footage, searching for rational explanations that remained elusive, blurring the lines between vigilance and paranoia. The children became increasingly withdrawn. Lily clung to Sarah, while Tom retreated into silence. Their innocence seemed replaced by a constant low-level fear. Attempts at normalcy, bedtime stories, movie nights, felt hollow, tainted by the shared trauma. Their home had become a stage for the ongoing nightmare. trapping them in a psychological prison. The lingering fear cast a long shadow, threatening to consume them entirely. The game, it seemed, was far from over. Chapter 8. Fractured Family. The unspoken tension in the Miller household solidified, becoming a suffocating presence woven from exhaustion and fear. Sarah tried to combat it by imposing order. Meticulous cleaning, rearranging furniture, scrubbing walls as if to physically erase the lingering sense of violation, but the effort drained her, leaving her frayed and irritable. Sleep offered no escape, her dreams still replaying the terror, deepening the lines of strain on her face. David, in contrast, retreated into stoic silence. His attempts at rationalization had failed, leaving him frustrated and helpless against the weight of his family's fear. He obviously reviewed security footage, searching for answers in the digital shadows, a quest that proved fruitless. His attempts to comfort Sarah or the children felt inadequate, his words sounding hollow against their shared trauma. He often sat alone, staring into space, a shadow of his former confident self. Caught in the crossfire of their parents' anxieties, the children grew more withdrawn. Lily, once vibrant, clung to Sarah, trembling at sudden noises. Tom retreated into a hauntless stillness, his playful energy extinguished, his smile replaced by a vacant expression that mirrored his parents' unspoken fears. Shared meals became agonizing rituals of silence, punctuated only by the clinking of cutlery. The comfort of family dinners evaporated, replaced by a heavy dread. The children picked at their food, growing thinner. The once harmonious rhythm of their life disintegrated into oppressive silence, broken only by the children's startled cries or nightmare-fueled screams. Sarah's attempts to soothe them often left her feeling hopeless. David's frustration mounted with his inability to protect his family or find a logical explanation. His helplessness sometimes manifested as anger, lashing out at Sarah in sharp outbursts. Minor disagreements escalated into bitter confrontation fueled by exhaustion and hopelessness. The foundation of their marriage cracked under the strain, resentment simmering beneath the surface. Their different coping mechanisms widened the rift. Sarah immersed herself in daytime routines, clinging to normalcy, while David isolated himself with the fruitless search for answers. This divergence created misunderstandings and unspoken accusations, turning their shared trauma into a battleground. The children mirrored this fracturing. Lily's attachment to Sarah intensified, while Tom retreated further into himself, their personalities eclipsed by fear. The house itself seemed to reflect their brokenness. Every creak and shadow served as a grim reminder of the presence that had invaded their lives. Fear and isolation created invisible barriers, transforming the loving family into a collection of individuals struggling alone. Unspoken words hung heavy in the air, a testament to the devastating psychological impact of their ordeal. The unity that once defined them had shattered, replaced by dread and an overwhelming sense of loss. They were a fractured entity, their future as uncertain as the shadows in their home. Chapter 9. Unraveling the Mystery. The gnawing unease refused to loosen its grip on the Miller household. Sleep offered little relief. Sarah's subconscious replayed shadowed figures and whispered threats, the cryptic messages bleeding into her dreams. The police investigation, declared unexplained by Detective Miller, provided no answers and no respite. His conclusions felt like a polite dismissal, leaving Sarah increasingly convinced that something more than coincidence or stress was at play. While logic pointed to the lack of concrete evidence, the unsettling phenomena persisted. Faint rhythmic knocks within the wall, objects subtly shifting place, the constant prickle of being watched. Sarah remained hyper-alert, every house sound jarring her nerves. The house, once comforting, felt like a labyrinth of anxieties. David's stoicism, no longer a comfort, now felt like a barrier. His struggles to accept the depth of her fear created distance, fueling arguments born from exhaustion and mutual frustration. Sarah felt profoundly isolated, intensifying the oppressive atmosphere. Abandoned by official channels, Sarah realized she needed answers for her own sanity, if not for protection. She had to delve into the mystery herself. Her investigation began tentatively at the town's historical society. Poring over old property records, she traced the house's ownership back through generations, finding mundane accounts of births, deaths, and sales. But hidden in the margins, in faded annotations and brief asides, she uncovered accounts of unsettling events eerily similar to their own. One record from the 1920s described a family plagued by unexplained noises and moving objects. Another from the 1950s detailed cryptic messages appearing on walls. A chilling consistency emerged. This wasn't just their experience. It was a reoccurring pattern tied to the house itself. Each afflicted family, separated by decades, endured a wave of inexplicable disturbances that eventually subsided, only to re-emerge later. It was as if the house itself channeled some cynical, malevolent energy. This realization fueled Sarah's research with new urgency. This wasn't a simple haunting or prank, it felt older, deeper, rooted in the property's very foundation. She interviewed elderly neighbors, cautiously inquiring about local legends. Some whispered tales of the house being cursed or built on disturbed ground. Others dismissed it as superstition, though their hesitant tones suggested a shared unease about the property's history. Her research led her to Mrs. Gable, a local historian who had documented the town's past for decades. Mrs. Gable listened to the unnerving calm, her expression a mixture of pity and understanding. She confirmed Sarah's findings, adding a layer that sent fresh chills down Sarah's spine. The house, she explained, was built on land once held sacred by a local Native American tribe. Legends told of a powerful guardian spirit, angered when the ground was desecrated by the original construction, which had been plagued by accidents and misfortune. The house, built on this troubled land, had perhaps become intertwined with its lingering, disruptive energy. Sarah's investigation became a personal quest, not just for answers, but to understand the root of the fear consuming her family. Seeking control in the face of the inexplicable terror, the house's history intertwined with her present reality, creating a macabre tapestry. Days blurred into nights as she immersed herself in dusty archives and old photographs, finding images of past residents whose eyes reflected the same haunted look she saw in her own mirror. The lines between past and present blurred. She felt an eerie connection to those who came before. Their anxieties mirrored her own. The weight of the history was crushing, but Sarah felt understanding the patterns was the only way to break it, to reclaim her family from the grip of this reoccurring horror. The shadow of doubt lifted, replaced by a chilling certainty. The house wasn't just disturbed, it was caught in a cycle, and she was determined to end it. Chapter 10. Confrontation. An old photograph, brittle with age, trembled in Sarah's fingers. It showed a family posed stiffly on the porch of this very house, their smiles strained, their eyes holding a haunted look that mirrored her own reflection. The date stamped on the back, 1953, confirmed her deepest fear. This wasn't isolated. It was a repeating nightmare. Days spent immersed in archives had pieced together fragmented stories, revealing a chilling pattern of unexplained events tied to the house, corroborated by police reports and old newspaper clippings detailing the past residents' ordeals. One particularly disturbing file detailed the Henderson family in the 1970s. Their experience, eerily similar to the Millers, ended tragically. The father succumbed to stress-induced heart failure, the mother gradually declined into psychiatric care, and the children were reportedly plagued by lifelong anxieties. This wasn't just a haunting. It felt like a curse, an entity feeding on the inhabitants' fear and vulnerability. The house itself seemed complicit, a conduit for this recurring malevolence. The cryptic messages, the unsettling noises, they weren't random. They were deliberate acts designed to torment and break the family's spirit. The weight of this realization was immense. She wasn't just protecting her family, she was battling an entrenching, cyclical evil. Logical police work was useless here. This required a different kind of confrontation. David, though no longer dismissive, still struggled to fully accept the implications, his rational mind resisting the horrifying truth. Their arguments shifted, the foundation of their marriage strained by the unspoken terror growing between them. One evening, while David was at work, Sarah felt compelled to explore the source of the disturbances further. Armed with a flashlight, she descended into the unfinished section of the basement behind the partition. The air hung heavy and damp. Deep within the shadowed space, concealed beneath loose floorboards, she found a hidden compartment. Inside lay another collection of old journals, pages filled with shaky handwriting chronicling the despair of previous families. They detailed the same pattern: noises, messages, escalating dread, followed by an unexplained cessation after a period of intense fear. Disturbingly, the journals revealed that each family had, like Sarah, desperately sought answers, investigating the source of the phenomena. Their efforts seemed only to intensify the activity, driving them closer to despair. Reading their accounts, Sarah saw a chilling reflection of her own frantic investigation. A cold understanding washed over her. The entity, whatever it was, didn't just cause fear, it fed on it, particularly the desperation born from trying to understand and fight it. The more they struggled for answers, the stronger it became. This wasn't a battle to be won with evidence or force. Sarah realized she had to change tactics. She couldn't fight the darkness directly, she had to starve it. She needed to break the cycle of fear by denying the entity its sustenance. Instead of confronting the presence, she would confront the fear itself, focusing on creating calm, resilience, and connection with her family. The following days saw a shift. Sarah focused on reclaiming their home's atmosphere. She opened curtains, filled the house with light and calming music, and cautiously created moments of family connection, deliberately ignoring minor disturbances. She talked openly with David, sharing not just her research but her new strategy, fostering mutual support instead of argument. Their shared struggle became a source of unity against the unseen influence. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the house began to quiet. The unsettling noises lessened, the cryptic messages ceased, the pervasive tension eased, replaced by a fragile sense of peace. The house began to feel like their home again. The confrontation was a dramatic climax, but a slow, steady reclaiming of their lives by choosing resilience over fear, unity over despair. The house stood, its history unchanged, but its power over them was broken. Chapter 11. Epilogue. Though the overt disturbances ceased after Sarah shifted their focus from fighting the presence to nurturing their family's resilience, the silence that settled in the house was heavy, laden with the weight of their ordeal. The house stood as a monument to the terror they had endured, and living within its walls was a constant, painful reminder. Scars remained etched onto their psyches. David wrestled with the disintegration of his rational worldview and the guilt of his initial dismissal, while Sarah carried the weight of the chilling history she'd uncovered and the near fracturing of her family. The children, though seemingly bouncing back, exhibited lingering anxieties, night terrors, sudden clinginess, silent testaments to their trauma. The unspoken fear and differing ways they processed the trauma created a fragile tension, threatening their bond they fought to protect. Recognizing they couldn't navigate the treacherous emotional landscape alone, they sought therapy. The sessions were difficult, forcing them to excavate buried memories and articulate shared fears. Slowly, guided by their therapist, they learned to communicate their anxieties without blame, to validate each other's experiences, and to rebuild trust. They discovered coping mechanisms: journaling for Sarah, woodworking for David, art and play for the children, finding individual paths to process lingering dread. Healing involved not just therapy but reclaiming their lives, yet the house remained a potent symbol of their trauma. Staying felt like a constant battle against painful memories, but leaving felt like surrender. Ultimately, the decision emerged not as an escape, but as a conscious choice for a future less defined by the past. Selling the house was surprisingly straightforward, a quiet release. Their new home, modern and bright, felt initially sterile, but offered a blank canvas. Settling in was gradual, a process of cautiously creating new, positive memories to overlay the old. They filled the space with laughter, art, and warmth, rebuilding their family life on a foundation of hard-won resilience and deeper understanding. They learned to accept that the past was an indelible part of their story, but it no longer held power over their present. The chilling uncertainty of what exactly happened never fully resolved. Was it a curse, a haunting, or a shared psychological break fueled by the house's oppressive history? They learned to let go of the need for concrete answers, accepting the unsettling ambiguity, yet the experience left a permanent residue, a vigilant awareness in Sarah, a compulsive checking of locks by David, a shared unspoken understanding that some things remained beyond comprehension. One night, months later in their new home, Sarah awoke to a faint, familiar scratching sound seemingly from downstairs. She lay still, heart pounding, until David reached for her hand in the darkness. They listened together as the sound faded, the silence returning. No words were needed. It wasn't the paralyzing terror of before, but a subtle, persistent echo, a reminder of the fragility of peace, the psychological imprint of their ordeal, or perhaps a chilling testament to the enduring mystery of the unseen. They had moved forward, scarred but stronger, forever changed by the hidden room and the shadows it cast, learning to live with the quiet hum of the unknown in their reclaimed lives. Thanks for watching, guys. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.